There are moments that, if you've never raised a toddler, seem completely ridiculous. A banana breaks in half. They get the wrong color cup. You press the elevator button before they do. You peel their orange when they didn't want help. And within seconds, a child who seemed totally fine suddenly falls apart like the world has just ended. They cry, scream, throw themselves on the floor, kick, toss things, turn red, and completely lose it. And you're left standing there, exhausted and confused, wondering how something so small could possibly cause such a huge reaction. This is one of the most draining parts of raising a 2 or 3-year-old, not just because the meltdowns are loud or intense, but because they seem so completely out of proportion. Adults look at the situation and think, it's just a banana, it's just a cup, it's just a tiny thing. But for toddlers, what you see on the surface is almost never the whole story. When a small child falls apart over something little, what's collapsing in that moment is not just the banana or the cup or the elevator button. What's collapsing is their sense of control, their sense of predictability, and a nervous system that was already too full and just got pushed past its limit. In other words, your toddler is not really exploding because of that tiny thing. That tiny thing is just the last drop. And that matters because adults usually focus on the final trigger and assume that must be the real cause. But with toddlers, a meltdown is often the result of a whole chain of pressure building up underneath the surface. Maybe they're tired, maybe they're hungry, maybe they're overstimulated, maybe they just had to stop doing something they loved. Maybe the whole day has been full of changes, demands, and little disappointments. And then at some point, their small nervous system simply can't take one more thing. Whatever happens last, even if it seems tiny, is just what lights the match. That's why it feels irrational to adults, while to the toddler, it feels like a real disaster. Adults have tools for handling emotions. We can pause, breathe, talk ourselves through something, or at least understand what's happening inside us. Toddlers can't. They have very big feelings, but they don't yet have the language, the patience, or the emotional breaks to manage those feelings well. That's why little things to us can feel enormous to them. A big part of this has to do with control. Toddlers live in a world where adults make most of the decisions. Adults decide when it's time to leave, when it's time to eat, what they wear, when they stop playing, when they get in the car, when they take a bath, when they go to bed. But this is also the exact stage when a toddler's need for independence starts getting very strong. They want to choose. They want to do it themselves. They want things to happen in a way that feels right to them. So when something suddenly goes differently than the version they had in their mind, the reaction is often much bigger than adults expect. It doesn't just feel annoying, it can feel deeply upsetting. That's why the wrong color cup can bring real tears. A banana that snaps in half can trigger a full meltdown. An elevator button pressed by the wrong person can feel unbearable. To adults, these are tiny details, but to toddlers, those details are often part of an internal picture they've already built. And when reality no longer matches that picture, their brain doesn't just feel disappointed, it feels like the world has suddenly gone wrong. This hits especially hard between ages 2 and 3, because toddlers at this age want a lot of control, but they are still terrible at handling frustration. Adults can accept that things won't always go their way. Toddlers usually can't. They don't just want what they want, they often want it right now, in this exact way, in this exact order. And when one piece of that changes, the whole emotional system can shake. That's not because they're being dramatic on purpose, it's because their brain is not yet mature enough to stay steady in the face of disappointment. And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings parents have. It can look like overreacting, but overreacting is an adult judgment. It assumes the child could have a smaller reaction and is choosing not to. With toddlers, a lot of these meltdowns are not strategy. They are not manipulation. They are real emotional dysregulation. Your child is not performing a crisis. They are inside one. That's also why logic usually doesn't work once the meltdown is fully happening. You say, "It's okay, it's just a banana." You say, "I'll get you another cup." You say, "This isn't a big deal." But your toddler is not in a state where they can use your logic in that moment. Once their nervous system has been pulled into a strong emotional reaction, their brain is no longer operating in a calm, thinking mode. It's not that they can't hear you, it's that they can't really take in what you're saying the way you hope they will. Another important piece is that toddlers often rely on repetition and sameness to feel safe. The same cup, the same blanket, the same bedtime routine, the same order of events. To adults, that can seem rigid or strange, but for toddlers, predictability helps regulate the nervous system. It makes the world feel easier to manage. So when something familiar suddenly changes, the reaction can be much stronger than the size of the change would suggest. That's why some days your child just seems thinner-skinned than usual. Something they handled fine yesterday suddenly sends them over the edge today. Yesterday you did the exact same thing and they were okay. Today, they collapse over it. That doesn't mean they've become more unreasonable overnight. It usually means their nervous system is more tired, more overloaded, and less able to cope. When a child is hungry, sleepy, overstimulated, or dealing with too many transitions, their frustration tolerance drops fast. And then something that would normally be manageable becomes the last straw. If you look at it that way, these meltdowns over little things are not really saying that your child is bad, spoiled, or trying to make life hard for you. They are often saying something very different. They may be saying, "I'm exhausted. I can't handle one more change. I need this world to feel more predictable. I need more control. I don't know what to do with this frustration. My nervous system is smaller than the feeling I'm carrying right now." And there's something heartbreaking about that, because as adults, we tend to see the behavior first and miss the helplessness underneath it. A child screaming because they got the wrong cup can look unreasonable from the outside, but from the inside, that child may be in a state where everything suddenly feels wrong, and they don't have any better skills yet for handling that feeling. A lot of toddlers do not need a lecture in that moment. What they are missing is the ability to bring themselves back to calm, and very often they have to borrow that calm from the adults around them. That's where this becomes more than just behavior. It becomes psychology. Because every time a toddler falls apart over something that looks small, what you are really seeing is a young brain struggling with frustration, predictability, and emotional regulation. You are seeing a child whose need for control is colliding with a world that will not always cooperate. You are seeing what happens when big feelings hit a nervous system that is still very much under construction. That doesn't mean parents will always respond perfectly. There will be days when you're tired, stressed, rushed, and your child's meltdown over a broken cracker becomes the last straw for you, too. That doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you a human being with limits. But understanding what these meltdowns really are can change the way you see your child. Instead of seeing a kid who is making a big deal out of nothing, you start seeing a child who is genuinely overwhelmed. Instead of thinking, "This is just a small thing," you begin to understand that to a toddler, small things can carry very big feelings. So if your child has been falling apart lately over things that seem unbelievably minor, they may not be saying, "I'm bad," or "I'm trying to make your life miserable." They may be saying, "I can't handle one more thing. I don't know what to do with this feeling. I need the world to feel more predictable. I need more help regulating than I have right now." And sometimes, underneath all the screaming, crying, and chaos, what your toddler may really be saying is something very simple. "This feels too big for me," even if it looks small to you. If this changed the way you see your toddler's meltdowns, subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments what small thing causes the biggest reaction in your house. Is it the wrong cup, a broken snack, leaving the park, or helping when they didn't want help? Because so many of these behaviors are deeply connected. And if your toddler gets especially upset when you help them do something they wanted to do alone, that's not a separate issue at all. It's deeply tied to their need for control and independence. And that's exactly what the next video is about.